I was born an eighth-generation Georgian, 121 days after Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. That means that I grew up in a South that was radically different from the one my white ancestors knew. And while the arc of our beloved region's history has bent towards justice over the course of my life, what it means to be Southern has changed too. So I want to find out, what does it actually mean to be Southern in this modern world, from ordinary women who make their little corner of the South a better place, who have bloomed where they were planted and have led extraordinary lives. So y'all grab a seat at the welcome table and join the conversation. We're delighted you're here. Hey, it's Stacy with Down South House and Home, and welcome to another episode of At the Welcome Table. Now, for this episode, we sit down with Kathy Trocheck. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, how about Mary Kay Andrews? Because if you are a Southern woman who takes books to the beach, you've probably taken at least one book written by Mary Kay Andrews. She is a New York Times best-selling author and is known as Queen of the Beach Reads. And even though she's been on the New York Times bestseller list more times than she can count, she's really just good people. So we were delighted when she sat down with us to talk about her journey from being Kathy Hogan, a nice little Catholic girl from St. Pete, Florida, to becoming a world-renowned author. So grab a glass of iced tea, sit back, and join in this incredible tale of Kathy Trocheck. She is a delight. Kathy Trocheck, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I think a lot of your fans are going to know you better as Mary Kay Andrews.
Probably so.
And I have to confess that I am not a big book reader, but I read one of your books, or listened to one of your books over the weekend, and I am hooked. I read The Weekenders, and I'm now on The Saint. I think
Summer's
it's
at the
got
Saint. Summer's at the Saint.
Summer's at the Saint. Summer's at the Saint, and it's got old money, class divide, betrayal, saving the family name, cataclysmic event. It's got every Southern plot point you could ask for, and it's just a great walloping ride. And I've just enjoyed it, and I'm hooked now. So I'm going to start off with my three questions. Who are you? Where are you from? And who are your people?
Well, I'm Mary Kay Andrews because I'm wearing makeup right now. When I'm not wearing makeup, when I'm in my stretched out yoga pants and my hair is matted down to my head, I'm Kathy Hogan Trocheck. I'm a native Southerner, but I tell people I write with a Southern accent, but I don't necessarily speak with a Southern accent. I am a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother, I'm a novelist, and lately I've become a little bit of a social activist.
Ooh,
So
really?
that's who I am.
So you grew up in Florida, right? St. Pete, and then you went up to the University of Georgia,
I did.
right? And you went to school with some friends of mine, which is how I was fortunate enough to be introduced to you. So you were there. I think you graduated in 1976, and I went to the University of Georgia. I started in 1984, and I graduated, in the 1990-ish. So I took the long way around. But like when I was at the University of Georgia, it was the very conservative Reagan era, and I remember growing up in Athens that. The 70s in Athens was a very different environment. What was it like? Because I think when you first started college, women had just gotten the right to get a credit card.
Right, and I started at Georgia. I transferred from Virginia Commonwealth University in the middle of my sophomore year, but right before I started at Georgia, they had just passed a rule that women could actually didn't have to wear a raincoat over shorts when they crossed campus, and that women could wear jeans. So you know. That was sort of what I walked into. I had no idea about any of this. I went to Georgia to go to journalism school. I wanted to go to journalism school. My father wouldn't let me go to the University of Florida because he said it was too crazy. He had no idea that Georgia, was crazier. I mean, I
Yeah.
was there. I worked on the college paper, the Red and Black, and I was there when they had
Mm-hmm.
the record-setting streak.
Yep.
I covered that for the Red and Black, and but I was intent on getting my degree and getting out and getting a job. So I treated the Red and Black like it was my job. Classes
Mm-hmm.
were secondary, for
Yeah.
better or for
Uh-huh.
worse. And
Yeah.
actually, that stood me in good stead because one of my colleagues at the Red and Black helped me get hired for my first newspaper job right out of college. So
And
I'm
was that
forever
in the
grateful.
Marietta Journal or?
No, it was for the Savannah Morning News.
Oh, that's right.
I
Oh,
started,
and
yeah.
you went down. You went down to Savannah. So you moved from Athens down to Savannah.
Well, I
So
moved
I mean,
home.
it's what?
I moved home. I graduated at the end. We were on quarters back then, and I graduated.
Yeah.
My parents were out of money because it was out of state tuition. And so I took overloads to my two last quarters at Georgia and
Uh huh.
graduated at the end of winter quarter. I went home, got a couple of part-time jobs, moved home to my parents, got engaged, and we got married in November of 76. And right from there, I went to work for the Savannah Morning News as a baby newspaper reporter.
So Savannah, I'm sure was still very old school back then. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like trying to get your foot in the door?
It was hard. It wasn't like I was a honor student because I wasn't. Um, I had done some stringing for the afternoon paper in St. Pete, and I had clips from the Red and Black from the college paper, and that meant something. Um, but and I graduated into a recession. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
so, you know, Gerald Ford was president, and there was gas rationing, and there weren't a whole lot of jobs. But a friend who was a year ahead of me at Georgia at the Red and Black called me up and said, "Hey, we've got an opening at the Savannah paper." And
Mm-hmm.
so my fiance, and I were able to get married, and it was culture shock moving to Savannah. I had no idea that I was moving some places at that time so insular.
And so, is that where you picked up your themes of old money and the class divide that you put in your books
Very much,
now?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was the first time anybody had ever said to me, I would go cover some function, and I, was got married at 22 and was very proud to take my husband's name, which is hard for Southerners to pronounce. It's Trocheck.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go to cover something, and these grand dames would say, "Oh, Trocheck, Trocheck. I don't believe I know any Trochecks. Darling, who are you people? Where are you from? I don't know your people." And I didn't know how to answer that. I just thought, why does that matter? But it mattered. In
Yeah.
1976 in Savannah, Georgia, people needed to know what tribe, who was your tribe, and
Uh huh.
why do you have a funny last name? So then I would say, well, my maiden name is Hogan. That was easy to pronounce, and there were a ton of Hogans. Savannah is a Irish stronghold.
Uh huh.
So then
Yep.
people would say, "Oh, you must be Candy Bubba," and I would say, "No, I don't, I don't think so." but I had, until that point, I didn't really have an idea of what tribalism was like until I
Right.
got to Savannah.
And that's pretty tribal, and it's hard to break into. Did you ever feel like you were accepted, or did you always feel like you were a little
No, but
out
you
of the
know,
group?
what I really learned was that being an outsider had a distinct advantage because I uh, didn't know what the wrongs and rights were. So I could ask stupid, tactless questions,
Yeah.
um, and I, being an outsider gives you a viewpoint that you might not have otherwise. It's like you're looking
Yeah.
down and you see why is that so important to people where you went to church or where you what you know what did you go to Savannah Country Day or did you go to St. Vincent's? So I think as an observer of human nature, it was a great learning experience for me.
I would imagine. Then you went up to. Did you come up to Atlanta and then go to the
Yeah,
Marietta Journal, or did you go to the?
yeah. No, I didn't even start at the Marietta Journal. I couldn't get a job at a daily. I got a job at one of the neighbor newspapers, which were owned, I guess still are, by Otis Brumby. And so I couldn't get a job at the AJC at that point. We moved to Atlanta so my husband could go back and get an engineering degree at Tech. And
Uh huh.
so, yeah, I was making, I think I was probably making what I thought was huge money, $175 a week at the Savannah paper. And I went to work for the neighbor newspapers, and I think I was making 125 or 135 a week and putting my husband through Georgia Tech.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, that was a lot to. I mean, I would have imagined those newsrooms, no matter where you went, were still very male dominated, without any sort of chivalry that was, you might have.
Well, the reporters, the thing that the ties that bound us together were we were all young and poor. Lots
Yeah.
of us were putting spouses through grad school or school. Um, Mostly we were in the same boat. Now, I didn't know. I worked for the neighbor for 6 months and I got hired to the Bigs at the Marietta Journal. So I spent 20 months working for Otis Brumby. And it wasn't until I got hired for the AJC was starting up these zoned editions called extras. And I was one of my buddies who I was working with at the Marietta Journal. We got hired at the same time. And I said, just think, we're going to be making twice what we were making working at the Marietta paper. And he said, no, we're not. I said, sure we are. I mean, I'm mathematically challenged. It turned out he was making substantially more money than me because he was a man.
Yeah. And you had no recourse at all.
I went and yelled at the managing editor who had assured me multiple times that he couldn't get me any more money.
Ooh. And what did he say?
He said, "You're right. It's not right, but that's the policy."
So, I mean, I would imagine that in that environment, that would like turn you into quite a feminist. I mean, I'm sure that, I mean, sure, feminism was, that was, I mean, feminism was, a big deal in the 70s and early 80s. But I mean, that kind of experience would, I mean, I think would harden you in a lot of ways towards,
It
being
didn't.
more of a, what, it
It
didn't?
didn't. I was
No?
not. No, I was really concentrating on getting ahead with my career,
Uh-huh.
and I never thought of myself as a feminist. I just thought, well, this sucks. And later on, when I worked at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I learned that some of my male coworkers who'd got hired after me from bigger papers, that they were making more money than me, and it infuriated me. But I think my feminism came late in life when I finally said, this isn't right.
And then what did you do when you said that?
I I decided to advocate for myself. I woke up one day and thought, if I don't believe in me, if I don't speak up for myself, nobody else is going to. So,
Yeah.
I had, and unfortunately, I had women bosses who were not particularly invested in helping women get ahead. They had their own agendas, for better or for
Mm-hmm.
worse. So yeah, I was kind of late to the game. It was finally I said, first of all, I said I got to get out of newspapers. I had two young kids. And I wanted to have a life. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
going to get ahead at the paper. Unfortunately, in lots of jobs, you get pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm.
And I got pigeonholed as somebody who turned out light, bright, quick stories. I didn't get pigeonholed as somebody who was a good writer. I was a good writer. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty good. And at that point, I thought, okay, you're in charge. And I had a mantra every day. I would drive home from the paper, and I would just chant to myself, they don't get to define me, and they don't get to limit me. And
How did you learn to do that? I mean, did like
I didn't
where
have
did
any
that
other
come from?
choices. I didn't have any other
Yeah.
choices. If I wanted to, if I wanted to get ahead with being a writer, the managing editor, I went to see the managing editor because I wanted to switch departments, and he flat out told me, "You're not a good writer. You'll never be a writer."
Are you serious?
Yeah.
And there's just no hope for you.
Right. At that
Like,
point, it was like, well, the writing's on the wall. They have decided that that's who you are, and they will typecast you and put you in that broom closet.
yeah.
And
When you
my
when
managing editor said, "You're just adequate as a reporter."
so what were you reporting on? Was I mean, you
I was
said
a
light
features
bright
writer.
stories.
I was a features writer,
So
but I did a lot of. I'd always had an interest in crime writing. I'd been a police
uh-huh.
reporter, and I'd covered cops, what we called cops in courts. So I always had that interest, and if I could get myself assigned to a breaking news story to do a feature angle on it, then I would do that. So so then I just started writing. There were a group of us in the newsroom. We all were at that point. Everybody, I think every reporter in the country had a unpublished manuscript and a bourbon bottle in their bottom desk drawer. I didn't have a bourbon bottle, but I did have a manuscript we
Thanks.
had a writers group. We would meet for lunch on Thursdays at a bar down the street from the paper called the Kimball House on Marietta Street at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we would exchange chapters. And after about, I don't know, 6 months, the writers group kind of fell apart because everybody just wanted to bitch about the paper. But
Uh-huh.
I thought this was, the idea that I had to show something once a week gave me the motivation to keep going. And so I wrote on nights and weekends, and after the writers group fell apart, I just kept going.
I just that takes a lot of resolve. I mean, I'm just trying to think about when, just even the 80s, just like now, I mean, I dropped out of college and worked construction. So I did my own,
Right.
weird things. But, doing something with as much confidence as, starting a book, writing a book, advocating for myself was very hard,
No, it
back
still
then.
is.
And yeah, I mean, it still is very hard. And sometimes a lot of things haven't really changed as much as we might like to think that they are. But so was your that first manuscript, was that the first book that you
No,
published?
it didn't get published. No, but it taught me that I knew that I could write a book. I
Yeah.
I went to a writer's workshop where Sue Grafton was teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and I took my first manuscript with me. I had sent it out to some agents, and to a couple of editors, and I'd gotten nice rejection letters, not form ones, but nice ones
Yeah.
saying, you're showing me something. This isn't it, but and so I basically spent the last year or so at the paper. A friend of mine taught me a great lesson, which she called the scam a day. And the scam a day was that every day I woke up and I thought, today I will do one thing to further my plot of getting out of the paper and getting published. So maybe that thing is sending a query letter. Maybe that thing is going down to the newspaper's reference library and researching editors or agents. Now, my friend's scam was she would go out and buy lottery dream books because her scam was she was going to hit the lottery and get out of a day job.
I think yours had a little more substance than hers.
As far as I know, she did not hit the lottery, but
Hit the lottery.
she did teach me the value of waking up every day and having something to look forward to that would further your evil plot, and also taught me to regard it. Up until then, I'd been a rule follower. I'd been a good Catholic girl. And I thought, screw that. The rules aren't working out for me, so I think I'll break the rules. And I'll break the rules that were meant for other people. I mean, they were meant to help white guys get ahead. The rules weren't meant to help people like me. They were meant to help somebody else. And so I decided to break the rules that were keeping me in bondage.
Yeah, and I remember back then, I think, we were talking about women not necessarily helping women. I think that there were so few spots available for women that they were very competitive and they will push you down as opposed to help lift you up. And I still see some of that today, of women, my age, they're a bit more trying to push you out as opposed to bring you in. And it seems like it's gotten better. But yeah, I think that was, I think that took a lot of courage to do the scam a day. But did your relationship with your husband help you with that? I mean, what was?
Yeah, I could never have done what I was doing without my husband. I had 2 young kids, and so I would put the kids in bed after dinner, and then I didn't have a computer at home. So I'd sneak back to the paper at night and write on their computer, which was against the rules.
Yeah.
And I never could have quit my job eventually when I did get a book publishing contract, because he had a day job and he had benefits, and we couldn't do without those. So yeah, I mean it helps tremendously, and I never want to discount the fact that my husband has always been a partner in my success, because I can remember other people at the paper saying, "Oh my gosh, can you make a living doing this?" And I would, writing fiction, and I would say, "Yeah, if somebody in your family has benefits."
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, it's a cold, cruel world out there.
So did you get the advance and quit, or did you
No,
how did you manage that transition?
I got signed to a 2-book contract with HarperCollins. I got an agent. And I finished the first book while I was still working at the paper, and it was the first and only time I've ever finished a book early. I think I finished it in March, which I made my deadline, and then I actually asked if I could go part-time, and my editor at the time said no. The managing editor of the paper doesn't want part-time employees. Well, now that's all they want. They don't want to pay anybody benefits.
Right.
But, so my hand was forced, and so I quit. I handed in my 2 weeks notice at the end of April of 1991.
Wow.
So Cinco de Mayo 91 was my liberation day. And then my first book came out. I'd finished the first book, handed it in, and then I was starting to work on the second book. So the first book, Every Crooked Nanny, came out in 1992. Yeah.
That still must have been terrifying to,
even though,
what did you tell yourself, if you can remember, the
Well, I had to do I did magazine freelance, and I did whatever freelance jobs I could get, writing freelance jobs I could get for that first year until my book came out. You get the way the publishing world works is when you sign a contract, you get an advance on your royalty. So, mine was a hard soft deal, so I got part of my hardback advance, but it still wasn't anywhere near what I had been making at the paper. So I freelanced, but I told myself I was freelancing for the paper a lot, and I told myself, you do this for 1 year and then that's it, no more, because you quit the paper for a reason. You don't, if you keep doing that, that's just a crutch. And I just had to, again, I could not have done it without a supportive husband who I had to talk into believing in me. We were both terrified. I mean, he's like, you can't quit your job. What do you mean you're going to quit your job? You can't quit your job. We got kids to support. And I said, if you don't let me quit, I will be institutionalized. Well, I was serious.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine so. I tell you what, that Kathy Trocheck is a gutsy dame. I wish I could be more like her. And we'll get back to our conversation together so that we can talk about thrift store finds and recipes. But first, let me tell you how Down South House and Home supports itself. We bring all of our content to you free of charge, and we have this wonderful collection of Southern home goods with clean, classic designs. For example, we have this Mama Tried towel. It is a huge towel. It's 30 inches by 30 inches. It will iron smooth and look great on your oven handle. They make great gifts for the holidays, but we also have napkins, cocktail napkins, onesies, t-shirts, tote bags, all kinds of things that will come in handy during the holidays. All right, let's get back to Kathy Trocheck. Okay, so to do a completely different change of topic, you and I have a common friend, Lynn, and she and I have this illness of collecting antiques. Yep. And you apparently have the same one too. How did you get into doing that?
Well, I think, I grew up in St. Pete, which, we always called St. Pete the home of the newlywed and the nearly dead. And my mom was a great junker. We didn't have money growing up. So she would go to thrift stores or junk shops and buy stuff. And I got married at 22, and whatever furniture we had, I bought at yard sales or estate sales in Savannah, which was a great place. Back in the 70s, Savannah was a great place to get started junking.
Oh, I bet.
I like old things. They have stories, and if I don't know what the story is, I just make it up. But I like the patina of age.
Yeah.
The only things I don't like to buy new are mattresses and appliances.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to show you my latest find is this piece of British crystal. It weighs 6 pounds. It's an old rose bowl. And
wow,
this is where the frog went. But this, I just put that in my store because there's a part of my basement where I put all the things that I don't want Chuck Reese to see. And it's getting a little full. So I decided to start selling some of them, and because I think, we live in a big city, so we have access to a lot of, really nifty things. Yeah. But there's, a lot of people in other parts are, they don't necessarily have that in their junk shops. And then I give away deviled egg plates. I have like this obsession with deviled egg plates. I've got a legal box down in the basement where I put all the things that I don't want Chuck Reese to see. And it's got, I've got little cardboard dividers, and I think I've got 10 deviled egg plates that I just find them and I see them and I just can't let them go. It's like I can't leave them on some dusty Goodwill shelf.
My mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law was a hardcore garage sailor in St. Pete and a hoarder. And when she died, we were cleaning out her house, and I opened this little cupboard in her dining room. Her house was very small, not even 1,000 square feet. She'd been a widow for many years. And I kept pulling deviled egg plates out of this tiny little cupboard. And eventually, I think I pulled out like 13 deviled egg plates. Now, first of all, those were not her main deviled egg plates. Those were the auxiliary deviled egg plates because there were more in her kitchen cupboards.
Yeah.
But second of all, nobody ever knew her to make deviled eggs.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. She never made deviled eggs.
Now, do you have a deviled egg plate?
Of course. I think right now I have 3.
Okay. That's plenty. That's plenty. Do you make deviled eggs?
I do. Yeah, I have a
How did,
cookbook.
how did,
I wrote a cookbook about 5 years ago called the Beach House
yep,
Cookbook.
I saw that.
Yeah, the deviled egg. I come from a long line of deviled egg makers. My grandmother was a great deviled egg maker, and my mother, and my daughter made deviled eggs, and now my granddaughter makes them. So yeah.
And do you use a recipe or is it just all by feel?
I don't use a recipe. I just do it because I've been doing it for so long. I do it by, feel and taste. But my grandmother finally revealed the secret, which is bread and butter pickle juice.
Oh, okay. So she waters it down with the pickle juice?
I wouldn't call it
Or
watered down. I would call it flavors. Yeah.
so, but doesn't it make it looser? Because I try to drain my pickles before, so I don't
Oh,
have the
I don't put.
juice.
Yeah, maybe a. No, I don't even think I put a teaspoon in if I'm making like a whole batch.
Okay.
So, I'm putting in some mayonnaise and I'm putting in bread and butter pickle juice and celery salt and pepper and some mustard, dry mustard.
And so, how did you collect all those recipes? Were they family recipes, or did you just you
Well,
come
my
along
husband and I
them?
like to cook. And I come from a long line of good cooks. My mother-in-law was a great baker, and so yeah, we used to put recipes at the back of the novels when I was publishing with St. Martin with HarperCollins, and people loved that. And then I switched publishers to St. Martin's, and they didn't want to do that anymore. And people kept saying we miss the recipes. So I had enough saved up, and I thought I had just published The High Tide Club, which was my first dual timeline novel, and I had never written anything that ambitious before, and it nearly killed me. And so I told my editor after that, I handed it in like 5 months late. So I said, you know what? I want to do a cookbook next. I just can't pull another novel out at this point. So the cookbook was a nice palate cleanser.
Well, wasn't that harder because you have to get all the measurements right and the directions
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and it doesn't make as much money either, by the way, because I had
Really?
to pay. Yeah, yep. I had to pay the photographer. I had to pay the food
Mm-hmm.
stylist. I had to pay the recipe tester. Um, so yeah, it was not a money maker. Yeah, I did it. It was a passion project, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad I did it. It's got family pictures in it,
Yeah.
and I love when people say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I made your Beyond the Grave chicken salad," or "I made
Uh-huh.
your tomato pie," or "Oh my gosh, I love to make the oatmeal chocolate chip cookies." So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a nice thing.
Did you use any of your friends' recipes, or is
Yeah, a
these
few.
things
Yeah,
you just? Yeah,
yeah.
I got it.
One of my dear friends' mother's late mother shared her biscuit recipe with me, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's the last recipe in the book because we were getting ready to go to press, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have a biscuit recipe in there. How can I publish a cookbook that it's mostly about Southern cooking? I got to have a biscuit recipe, and so Mubby shared
Yeah.
her biscuit recipe.
Well, I several years ago, I think it's right before the pandemic started. I started reinventing or experimenting with recipes out of the white trash cookbook, and because I thought they were just so fun, and I would pick. I think I picked one that was it was a canned fruit cobbler, and I
Frozen
said this
dessert.
can't. It was no, wasn't frozen. You took 2 cans of fruit cocktail, with a heavy
Right.
syrup,
Right.
and some margarine and a Betty Crocker. Yeah, no,
Take it.
I was reading this recipe and it says it can't be good, and then also a Betty Crocker cake mix, and you cut up the pieces of margarine, you cook, and
So it was
I
a
swear
dump
to God,
cake.
it was. Yeah, it was a dump cake, but it was delicious. I mean, because I thought when I read that fruit cocktail, there said there is no way that can be good, and it was really just lovely. And I found several recipes in White Trash Cookbook that I thought
Yeah, I have
was
that somewhere. He came to Atlanta on a press tour, and he came into the paper to be interviewed, and I organized a covered dish, and we all made something out of the cookbook and served
because
it to him.
he was also I think gay at a time when it was
Oh yeah,
not
yeah,
particularly well accepted to be gay,
yeah.
and it's like I think like we both came up in a South that was very tribal, and it was like you had a box where you could be in. You had to
Yeah.
be in. If you didn't stay in that box, or part of you wandered outside the lines, then you were looked at askance. And and when I was coming of age in the '80s, it was a little bit more accepted
Right.
not to be in that box. And I mean, but even in the '80s, if you had a double pierced ear, you were a little
You're a
you were
big
looked at with
bohemian.
I mean, it was practically bohemian. You would get the side eye,
Hmm.
and you never wanted to get the side eye from a elderly Southern lady. But I did find that that White Trash Cookbook was, what I liked about it was is that it celebrated the way that people survived and
Sure.
made things good for their family,
Sure.
but it also honored these people that I think got looked down upon
Hmm.
in ways that they could probably never pull themselves up
Right.
in a way that's it's not. It's easier now. I think it was easier to be labeled as one thing or another
Right.
back then, and because I think the worst thing you could be called was white trash,
Sure.
as
Yeah.
and because and I see that in the in the theme of of especially the weekenders, there's that class divide, and you can you can't really cross it, or you're getting too big for your britches to cross it,
Yeah.
and I don't think that I don't think younger people understand that rigidity quite as,
Yeah.
because it doesn't exist now.
Oh, it does, but
It's, well, yeah,
well, if you go to,
I don't think.
when I go on book tour, and if I'm in a small town in the South, oh, you can definitely still see the class divide. You can see, the ladies who volunteer, and they can do that because they don't have day jobs, or they've
Hmm.
retired from their day jobs. I think it's still out there. It's not as rigid as it used to be,
Hmm.
and I think hopefully this younger generation says to themselves, "Screw that! I don't need that."
I was talking to this very lovely young lady who was in her 30s, and she has this blog and does all sorts of creative things. And we were talking about that box and how hard it is
Right.
to, because she was in a small town, Alabama, and being put in that box is hard to do,
Yeah.
and staying in it when you have a different idea is different.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you were going to give yourself when you were 21 years old, a piece of advice, what would you have told yourself?
I would have said your life's dream today might change because I thought I will, I got out of journalism school during Watergate. I was in journalism school when Watergate happened. And I wanted to be a crusading journalist. I believed in journalism. I believed I could change the world by telling truths and putting dishonest people's feet to the fire. And I had to let go of that dream. And so now I would say to myself, you know what? It's okay to change your dream. That doesn't mean you're giving up. It just means your perspective has changed and you want other things. And the world has changed and they didn't ask your permission. So I've become a huge believer in if there's a connecting theme in all of my books, it's that reinvention. I've reinvented myself,
Yep.
2 or 3 times. I was a newspaper reporter, then I was a mystery writer. Then I started writing what was called women's fiction. I wrote some rom-coms. I've kind of gone back and forth. And I think it's not giving up on a dream. I think it's saying you can change your goals. And it's a good thing to do that because eventually, lots of times, you come up against a force greater than yourself. And, when you come up against a stone wall, you can beat your head against it and come away bloody and beaten. Or you can say, screw that, I think I'll tunnel under. And that's what I did. I tunneled under.
You certainly did. So if you had a 21-year-old in front of you right now, would that be the same advice or
Yeah.
would it be different advice?
No, I would say be nimble.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, of course, if you're in college or you're in some kind of program that you're studying, pay attention to that, become the best you can be at that. But be nimble, be ready to, when the world changes, you may have to change with it. And certainly in the world of publishing, that's stood me well. When, when there are forces that you cannot overcome, then be nimble. Say to yourself, you
Yeah.
know what? I think I'll change course. I think I'll, so get as much training as you can. Uh, Networking is, and I don't mean it in a transactional way, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll make friends with you because you know, someday you'll do something for me and I'll do something for you. But really,
Right.
I think becoming part of a tribe of people who have goals and who have the same kinds of values is invaluable. I mean, I'm a member of a group called Friends in Fiction. It's 4 New York Times bestselling
Yeah.
authors.
Yeah.
At the start of the pandemic, we all had new books about to come out, and our book tours were canceled because the world was shutting down. And so we had to be nimble, and we leaned on each other. We said, we'll do this Friends in Fiction live on Facebook. We will crowdsource, which is what we did. We brought all of
Yeah.
our followers from our books together in one place
Yeah.
on Facebook, and now, we have 250,000 members of our Facebook group,
Yeah.
Friends in Fiction. So we didn't have a grand plan, and people always say, "Oh, you have to have a plan. You have to have goals." Sometimes you do, but sometimes it's if you're nimble and you're not afraid of hard work, and you have if you've done the work of being kind to people and being a member of a community, like we talk a lot on Friends in Fiction about being good literary citizens, and that means putting a hand out maybe to debut authors, putting a hand out to authors who are minority, BIPOC, being aware that they maybe didn't have the same opportunities getting published that we did. kind of our motto is a rising tide floats all boats.
Right.
And so I think if you're selfish, maybe you still get ahead. If you're a narcissist, maybe,
Yep.
the world the world isn't always fair. And so sometimes people who are selfish and heinous and narcissists do get ahead, but I don't think they enjoy the ride the way I have.
No, I don't think so. So you guys started Friends in Fiction in the pandemic, and you've grown from zero to
Right.
250,000 in 4 years.
Yeah, it'll
That's
be 5 years in
amazing.
April. 5 years in April.
Wow. Wow. That's a. I mean, and it was just goodwill, people coming in and hearing about you, and just because going like the way I'm experiencing social media now, it's that there's so much content out there,
Right.
and there's so many people have access to, the masses,
Yeah.
that it's very hard to get anybody's attention. So I
Yeah.
think that that's just a tremendous feat that you've been able to
Yeah.
accomplish
Well,
with.
we hired a managing director when we were about 6 weeks in, when we realized we couldn't do it all, and that's
Yeah.
made a difference. So, and we've tried to approach it in a professional way. We have a professional audiovisual company that takes us live. They do the AV part of it, as we call it. So we've really, the first night we went live, we didn't think anybody would watch. I was in my pajamas. If you watch you can watch, the shows are archived on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page. You can watch the very first one, and I'm wearing my purple silk pajamas. But 1,000 people tuned in that night because there was no place
Wow.
else to go and nothing else to do.
What do you think is the future of? I'm not calling you a content creator, but I mean, like, there's so much content being created that are you going to have? I mean, do you find it easy to continue to grow your audience because there's so much
No, it's
competition?
no, it's challenging. It's very challenging. There are other people who are doing podcasts. I mean,
Yep.
Jenna Hager on the Today Show
Yep.
just started a book podcast. No, it's incredibly challenging because there's a lot of noise out there, and to get heard in that noise is a challenge. The thing we have found is that our community on Friends in Fiction on our Facebook, they're very loyal. So when we do a live event, we each of us, the four of us, when we have a new book come out, we do a live event, and we get 300, 400, 500 people come to those live events, and they're very loyal, and they spread the word about our books. So I think that's been a really something in our favor.
Yeah. Does it ever get easier getting in front of the camera? Do you find it like I get nervous at getting in front of the camera?
I'm not nervous in front of the camera because I've been doing live events, book talks, since 1992. I've been at this a long
Yeah.
time. No, it doesn't. That part is easy for me. I'm an extreme extrovert.
Are you really?
You can't tell.
I would. See, I'm an introvert. It's like I like this podcast thing because I don't have to be around a lot of people. But yeah, there's some people who just like really need to be around other people and they really enjoy it. That's just not my thing.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it. I mean, the challenge is getting my books written. Taking, because that's my real job. This is all of this other stuff, marketing and public relations and doing Friends in Fiction. That don't pay the bills. The books
No,
pay the
it
bills.
doesn't.
Books
So
pay the bills.
so are you going to be writing a book soon, or are you going to be taking some time
Oh, I'm
off?
always working on one. I won't have one this summer for the first time in many years. I decided to go to every other year schedule. But now I've got a Amazon original Christmas short story that's coming out October 29th. That's called Holiday Hideaway. It's the first time I've done one of those. So I'm looking forward to that. And the paperback of my Christmas book from last year, Bright Lights Big Christmas, just came out last week or the week before last. I'm losing track of time. And then I'll have the paperback of Summers at the Saint will be out in May or June. But I'm
busy.
I'm into the next book. I'm going to New York tomorrow to do research for it. So, and I took a trip to Ireland last month to do research. So,
All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got to go
happy
pack, so I'm gonna let you go. I really, really have enjoyed this, and I know my audience will too.
thank you. It's been my pleasure.
It's been great, and hopefully I will run into you at
I
a
hope
junk
so.
shop somewhere.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Oh my goodness, y'all. Isn't Kathy Trocheck inspiring? She is definitely a down south house and home kind of woman. She's ambitious, tenacious, and doesn't take no for an answer. And I think we should all take a page out of Kathy's book, so to speak, and pull one scam a day. Just do one thing toward your own big, audacious dream. It doesn't have to be big. It can be small. Just do something every day. I'm rooting for you, and Kathy is too. And just remember, whether it's with China or Chinette, every table is a welcome table when it's set with love. Love y'all.